two states. Utah has a theme for itself to promote its natural beauties, but there's a little bit of, I think, cheeky but cool double entendre, if you know what I mean. So what you see and you read also has a different meaning if you look into it. So for example, I mentioned yesterday that Utah is highly associated with a particular religion, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's a long term, so because they believe in the Book of Mormon, they accept that we would call folks of that faith Mormons. Typically they refer to themselves as LDS, just a little acronym for Latter-day Saints. Anybody here member of the faith? Okay. So when we get to that sign, it generally shows Delicate Arch, which is a wonderful natural arch in Arches National Park as the backdrop. And then the phrase underneath, we just get a sense of where we're going to see it. Okay, towards the bottom of this slope, not this sign, but the next sign after that, it will say Life Elevated. Life Elevated. So, that to me is they're promoting the mountains. But at the same time, in the context of how deeply associated this state is with that faith, Life Elevated, right? The heavens. Or heaven, if you will. I thought this one would have Delicate Arch, but it looks like it actually, let me see if it has Lake Powell instead. So, yeah, this is showing Lake Powell. Okay, so welcome to Utah. And Life Elevated. Okay. So what I wanted to introduce you to was the flag of the state of Utah. So I'm going to go back to my little study of flag design. And almost a half of American states, about 20 of them, have had or have flags which have a dark blue or blue background with an emblem or seal of the state in the middle. So, Michigan, New Hampshire, Minnesota, Nebraska, I could go on and on with the states that have that flag design. So this is the flag design for the state of Utah, and incorporates a lot of fairly recognizable themes. First of all, you have the bald eagle, symbol of the United States, right? And also the crossing arrows representing military strength, but also the Utah militia, and I'll get to that in a minute. Then of course you have the American flag on either side, and we have 2 words and 2 dates. So industry, so the Mormon people see themselves as very industrious, and they are busy as a bee. So we have a beehive, okay? And the nickname of this state is the Beehive State. So I was told the Parliament building in Wellington, New Zealand is called Beehive because of its design. Kind of looks like a beehive. Okay, so you even see the bees themselves. And in fact, Utah has had the lowest unemployment rate of the states for many years now. It's quite booming in terms of its tech sector, especially as it relates to defense, cyber attack defense. So we'll see on our way into Salt Lake City the whole urban development that's occurred along that corridor. All right, what's the other word? Well, Utah, right? So in case you haven't figured out what state this is, they put their name on it. And then 2 dates. So more prominent is 1896. That is the year of admission to the Union. But I told you yesterday that the Mormon pioneers led by Brigham Young came to this territory unknown. They had no idea what they were going to find. And they arrived in what is now the Salt Lake City area in 1847. Now, technically, 1847, Utah was not part of the United States. It was still part of Mexico. In 1846, a war was begun between Mexico and the United States regarding territorial claims, as especially associated at that time with California. So this battles took place between 1846 and about mid to late 1847. So there was a little bit of overlap between the time the Mormon pioneers arrived in the territory as a Mexican territory, and then 1848, when the Treaty of Hidalgo ended the war between the two countries, and then this territory became part of the United States. So 1847 is that year. There's a holiday celebrated in this state called Pioneer Day, which is the day that Brigham Young led his followers through Emigrant Canyon, E-M-I-G-R-A-N-T Canyon, into what is now the Salt Lake City area. The community thrived, flourished, really did, and the population grew. In fact, other than California and maybe Nevada because of silver, Utah territory, if you will, should have been the next state admitted from all the states that were carved out of the former Mexican territory, which would include Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and even a little bit of Texas. But Texas had already been admitted to the Union. In fact, that's probably one reason why the two countries went to war. But that gap of 50 years had everything to do with what I described yesterday, and that is polygamy. So the practice of polygamy was enshrined in the practice of the faith of LDS members. And it was that practice which largely caused tension between them as a group and other Christians of American pioneers, and resulted in multiple physical skirmishes in different places, including their ideal community on the banks of the Mississippi in Illinois, now VU. And when that happened, the Americans who are not LDS raided their community and killed Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith having been the founder of the faith from upstate New York. And it was that event that prompted Brigham Young to lead his followers west, kind of following the path of the Oregon Trail that was leading other Americans to both Oregon and California. But they developed a separate parallel route called the Mormon Trail. And that therefore led to this growth in population, but unacceptability as a territory to be admitted to the Union. And it wasn't until roughly the mid-1890s that the leaders of the faith had a revelation that no longer was polygamy part of the practice of the LDS faith. So they terminated that. Now it's only one man, one wife. With that change, that literally allowed the U.S. Congress to say, okay, we can admit you from being a territory to a U.S. state, and that took place in 1896. So just as a little bit of a curious aside, when a church or a faith makes a big fundamental change like that, are there people who are going to say, I'm not changing, I like the way I'm living, I like having 6 wives? So a remnant group of people known as the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has remained as a non-recognized sect, not part officially of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints based in Salt Lake City. And many of their adherents live in a corridor between the Grand Canyon and Zion National Park, which straddles the border between Arizona and Utah. There's a state highway that runs through there. There's a community called Colorado City. If you've ever had a chance to drive through there, and especially stop in Colorado City, there's a cafe called Sisters Cafe. It's like a step back in time. Go in there. I was in there once, and I saw this long table of 12, all men, and some of them kind of having the long beard and all that. But all the wait staff were women in very long dresses, right? So modesty, if you will. So it's very well known that there's the practice of polygamy in those families in that area, and that's not the only area. And the other evidence of it, if you have a shrewd eye, is if you should drive through the streets, you'll say, my gosh, that's a huge house compared to what would typically be needed in a semi-desert community, right? And they're often walled off with high barriers, so they're more privacy. So just kind of a curious thing that continues. The law enforcement, of course, is aware of this. There's no crackdown on the practice per se, but there was one very notorious case that did come to the attention of law enforcement because one of the wives of Jim Jeffers went to authorities and said she had been abused. And I won't need to get into details, but it did lead to an investigation, an arrest, and imprisonment of Mr. Jeffers. So if they don't break the laws, otherwise, I guess they're kind of let it be, live in, right? So that's the kind of that sidebar on the fundamentalist. Okay, so one last thing about flags. I told you that the NAVA, the North American Vexillological Association, believes in simplicity in flags. Bear with me. So just in the last few years, the Utah legislature debated the possibility of changing their flag to a more contemporary design. This is what they came up with ultimately, which was finally approved and is now flown at the Utah State Capitol. But guess what? I don't want change. I want what we had. So there are many, many Utahns who are not happy with this change. So the Capitol flies the old flag at one end. Not in the prominent position of the new flag, but it's still flown. All right, let's look at this new flag. How many colors do we have? 4. So red, white, and blue. Oh, colors of the American flag, right? Pretty easy. And what's the other color? Gold. What's the highlight of the gold? It's a beehive. So we have the reference to industry in the beehive state. Also, we have the hexagon. Why a hexagon? Bees make honeycombs that are shaped in hexagons. Okay, kind of clever, right? Are there any dates on here? No. But a single star representing the fact that Utah is one of the states of the Union. Finally, the red, white, and blue aren't just thrown up there for color. What are they depicting? Mountains, exactly. So the Rocky Mountains. So you have the blue of the sky, the white of the snowy mountains, and the red of the earth. Or you can and also interpret it as this sacrifice of the people. So why this design is favored by designers as opposed to the public is you can look at this flag from afar. It's not a blue background flag that's confused with 20 other states. It's very simple but graphic. Remember I showed you the New Mexico flag? Pretty simple but graphic. So this design is favored because of its relative simplicity and recognizability from a distance. So that's what's happened now for Utah. And there's one other state of late that has changed its flag, I think just in the last year or two, also to go from that blue background commonality to a simple design of contrasting blues to represent that state. Maybe a little bit later on in our journey when I go through, if I have the chance, to kind of talk about your own state, provincial or national flags, I'll get a chance to talk about that. Okay? All right, so let me tell you a little bit about this morning. So we're going to have a drive that's heading west towards the town of Kanab, K-A-N-A-B, which serves as the gateway to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. Also, what we'll do is turn north onto Highway 89, and we'll use that scenic byway to get up to Bryce Canyon National Park. And then we'll double back a little bit after our visit to a place called Mount Carmel Junction, and from there head west into Zion National Park itself. It should be about an hour or so for our comfort stop. And then if we can, we're going to try to make a direct drive, which may take almost a couple of hours, to Bryce. And then I'm going to judge what your appetite level is versus your desire for activity so that we can make a plan for the few hours that we're at the park. It's going to be much colder up at 8,000 to 8,200 feet than it is down at 4,200 feet where we were just here in Page. So that's one of the considerations. But I remember I explained to many of you that the reason we're doing this a little bit extra early start is that we're time constrained by our need to get to a checkpoint to go through a wonderful tunnel built into the side canyon of Zion. And if we don't get to that checkpoint at 4 o'clock for a 4:30 transit through the tunnel, we literally could be turned around and said, go the long way. So we don't want that to happen. That's the plan. Any questions? All right.